Those who love to grow flowers will never have a bad life. This is not just a hollow blessing, but a karmic truth hidden beneath the greenery for thousands of years. The Avatamsaka Sutra mentions a profound concept: to see a world in a flower and a Bodhi tree in a leaf. This is not merely poetic rhetoric, it is the ultimate logic of how the universe operates. In the Buddhist worldview, all things in the world are projections of our self-nature. The word flower in Sanskrit symbolizes the cause of 10,000 virtues. Simply put, a flower is the omen of fruit, the crystallization of every subtle thought and intention during our journey of self-cultivation. When you face a potted plant, you are actually facing a mirror that reflects your soul. If your mind is restless, the flower withers. If your heart is compassionate, the flower flourishes. This subtle resonance is the most intuitive manifestation of the Buddhist principle that the environment changes with the mind. The ancient scriptures tell us that those who can empathize with plants must have a pure land in their hearts, untouched by worldly dust. This pure land is the foundation upon which all blessings depend. In this world full of variables, we are always searching for a sense of security. Yet we fail to realize that the simplest blessing is often hidden in a handful of soil and a cup of water on the balcony. Growing flowers is essentially a deep practice of giving and patience. When you pour water into parched soil, you are practicing momentary compassion. When you wait for the cold to recede and spring to bloom, you are cultivating the stability to resist impermanence. If you can feel inner peace because of a blooming flower amidst a complex life, then you have touched flower wisdom. This wisdom quietly changes your aura, giving you the resilience of an evergreen tree when facing life's storms. The legend of Sumana, the flower seller's karma. In the ancient Indian city of Shravasti lived a man named Sumana. His life was extremely poor, almost destitute. Every day before dawn, he would rush to the gardens outside the city to pick the freshest flowers and sell them to the nobles in the market. To others, Sumana's life was full of toil and lowliness, but he always wore a peaceful smile. For him, selling flowers was not just a livelihood, it was a sacred contract. He never cheated on weight and treated every flower as a perfect life, as precious as lapis lazuli. One sweltering morning, due to unusual weather, almost all the flowers in the garden had withered. Sumana searched everywhere and finally found a rare golden Mandarava flower growing in a hidden rock crevice. Its fragrance was pure and cold, and its beauty was breathtaking. Sumana knew that if he sold this flower to King Pasenadi, the reward would be enough to sustain him for the rest of his life, allowing him to escape his humble existence. He carefully picked the flower, wrapped it in soft silk, and hurried toward the city. However, at the city gate, he encountered the Buddha entering the city with his disciples to receive alms. In that instant, the noise of the market and the bickering of merchants seemed to vanish into a profound silence. The Buddha did not speak, but the majesty and compassion he radiated shook Sumana to his core. Sumana looked at the priceless golden Mandarava in his arms, and then at the Buddha's face, which was as solemn as the full moon. He experienced an internal storm. If he gave the flower to the king, he would gain money and status. If he gave it to the Buddha, he might remain hungry and continue to toil in the mud. In worldly logic, it was an obvious choice. But in that moment, his inner nature gave a different answer. He realized that his life of poverty might have been a trial to temper a heart that is not swayed by external things. He pushed through the crowd, ignored the mockery of others, and knelt before the Buddha, holding up the golden Mandarava. When he threw the flower into the air, a miracle occurred. The flower did not fall. Instead, it hovered above the Buddha's head, moving with his steps like a radiant canopy of light. Sumana wept with relief. The heavy burden he had carried for years seemed to vanish with that single act of offering. The king's realization. This act, however, drew the ire of the nobles. King Pasenadi's attendants were furious, considering it an insult to royal authority. A guard placed a sword at Sumana's neck, coldly warning him of the price of offending the king. Surprisingly, Sumana did not beg for mercy. He looked past the sword toward the Buddha. He thought of the seeds he had planted over the years, how they endured darkness to sprout and wind to bloom. "My lord," Sumana's voice was incredibly calm, "I have not wasted this flower. I have given it its true home. I am poor, but tending to plants has taught me that gold and silver can buy the vanity of power, but not inner peace. The king owns the entire land but is angry over a single flower. I own nothing, yet I feel unprecedented freedom because I gave this flower away." King Pasenadi, who had just arrived, heard these words. His anger, rooted in the challenge to his authority, began to waver. As a ruler, he had seen greedy pleas and hypocritical flattery, but he had never seen a lowly flower seller with such noble eyes. The Buddha turned and looked at Sumana with compassion. He did not use magic to drive away the soldiers. He simply watched. Under that gaze, Sumana felt his years of exhaustion, anxiety about the future, and the shame of poverty dissolve. The king stepped forward and asked, "Sumana, you knew this flower could bring you wealth. Why risk your life to throw it to a passing monk? Is freedom truly more important than your life?" Sumana replied, "Great king, a plant needs only one spring to bloom, but a human may need many lifetimes to bloom with the flower of enlightenment. By tending flowers, I have seen the karma of all things. I know that what we gain will eventually be lost. Only what we give away truly belongs to us." The king looked at the golden Mandarava still hovering above the Buddha. It was pure and solemn amidst the dust of the market. He felt a sudden sense of shame. He owned mountains of gold but spent nights sleepless over palace intrigues. He controlled the lives of thousands but could not control his own restless mind. Sumana, with nothing to his name, possessed a stability that even a king envied. The Buddha spoke, his voice like an ancient bell. "Sumana, what you offered today was not just a flower, but the pure heart you have tempered in loneliness. Your patience in the frost and your care for every seedling are your true virtues. This flower is merely the externalization of your inner merit." At those words, the golden flower emitted thousands of soft rays of light, bringing a sense of coolness and peace to everyone present. King Pasenadi let go of his pride, pulled Sumana up from the mud, and ordered his soldiers to put away their weapons. "This flower seller has taught me a lesson," the king said. "He needs no reward from me, for he already possesses the world's most precious treasure." The mirror of the soul: why gardening changes your life. Beyond the legend, we must ask, why does the simple act of growing flowers generate such a massive karmic field? In Buddhism, there is a concept. The environment follows the primary reward. The primary reward is our life subject, our heart. The environment is our surroundings, our home, family, wealth, and luck. By tending to plants, you are essentially using a miniature ecosystem to balance your inner heart. Your focus, patience, and compassion toward a plant are energy outputs. When this output reaches a certain level, your internal magnetic field shifts from scarcity and anxiety to abundance and peace. This change ripples out into your career and relationships. A person who can grow flowers well naturally possesses the ability to observe subtle changes and the grace to accept life's withering. This is the core logic of managing a good life. Growing flowers cultivates the stability of producing a heart that dwells nowhere. Modern suffering often stems from an extreme attachment to results. We want immediate returns on every investment, but gardening forces you to resist this utilitarian mindset. You cannot curse a seed into blooming tomorrow. You are forced to follow the rhythm of nature, which is the Buddhist practice of patience. When you become accustomed to waiting for a flower to bloom, you learn to wait for the low points of your life to pass. Your heart is no longer swayed by every external wind. When your heart is settled, the chaotic fields around you settle as well. You are no longer a passive victim of fate, but a master of your own rhythm. The secret of blessings and impermanence. Blessings are generated from your care and giving to another life. When you prune a dry branch or wipe dust from a leaf, you are practicing formless giving without seeking anything in return. In a home filled with vitality, this pure energy forms a shield. Physically, it filters air and dust. Spiritually, it filters negative thoughts and low moods. Growing flowers is also a precise experiment in karma. If you are lazy and overwater, the roots rot. If you neglect them in the sun, the leaves burn. This micro-landscape shows the law of, as is the cause, so is the effect. When you internalize this law, your sense of control over life leaps forward. You stop relying on luck and start working on the cause, while letting go of the effect. Furthermore, every flower and leaf we see is a manifestation of the seeds in our consciousness. If you are surrounded by life and harmony, these visual signals perfume your subconscious with beauty. Conversely, a person facing clutter and withered branches finds it hard to maintain pure thoughts. By beautifying your space, you are building a mandala for your soul, creating an internal sense of order. When your interior has order, your handling of worldly affairs becomes logical and calm. The deeper wisdom lies in facing impermanence. Most people fear wilting, but in the cycle of blooming and falling, the gardener rehearses the gains and losses of life. After seeing countless flowers bloom and fall, your heart develops a transparency. You realize that prosperity is a process, and so is fading. Withering is just the necessary path for the next accumulation of energy. This acceptance is the highest form of psychological resilience. A person who is not panicked by gain and loss radiates a stable aura, what is often called a countenance of nobility. Conclusion: cultivating the flower heart. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, it is said, "When the heart is pure, the Buddha land is pure." Growing flowers expands the capacity of your heart. When you can see the four seasons rotate in a single pot on a tiny balcony, your heart, once squeezed by mortgages and workplace stress, regains its elasticity. A person with a narrow heart will be annoyed by a needle falling on the floor, even if they are wealthy. But a person who understands that one flower is one world can find immense joy in a tiny bloom. This low-cost, high-frequency Dharma joy is irreplaceable. When your happiness no longer depends on material accumulation, but flows from your own nature, you have obtained true freedom. Growing flowers is a silent teaching. When you grow them so beautifully that neighbors feel joy and friends feel refreshed, you have completed an act of altruism. The merit of this, rejoicing in others' joy, feeds back into your aura. Your chi becomes smooth, and your luck opens up. This isn't magic. It's because your every thought has become soft and peaceful, reducing friction with the world. The ultimate bottom logic of why gardeners have good lives is not that life gives them special treatment, but that they use their flower heart to reshape the world. The core intention is not to possess, but to offer. When you water your plants, try to view them not as your property, but as seeds of the universe entrusted to your care. When you let go of the arrogant sense of control and instead foster a wish for all life to be cool and refreshed, your work becomes a spiritual offering. Life itself is like a flower. There are moments of budding hope, moments of brilliant glory, and the inevitable return to the soil. Buddhism does not teach us how to escape these cycles, but how to maintain an unwavering stability in every stage. If you care for your heart as you care for your flowers, pruning excess desires and watering parched compassion, then your life itself becomes a magnificent, never-ending assembly of flowers. May every gardener see the Buddha when the flower blooms, and see wisdom when the flower falls. May your days be more than just not bad. May they be as full and round as a lotus in full bloom.